welcome you to another edition of Being Well Informed. And I have with me, I'm so glad to have with me at this very hour, the very accomplished, the Honorable Carl Snowden, who is currently the convener of the Caucus of African American Leaders. And we are just thrilled to have you. You are such a historian.
Well, thank you for the invitation. Sorry for the mix-up last week, but congratulations on your program and getting it started.
Thank you so much. This program, Being Well Informed, is really all about making listeners more aware of events and issues. We're going to follow this topic today, your presence, also with the topic of long-term care insurance and how that has changed over the years. So we're going to talk about voting. We're going to talk about the Emmett Till app that your caucus is really at the forefront of. And we're going to again, enlighten our audience with so much information. So we will hope you continue to stay tuned. So, Carl Snowden, it has been quite an eventful week with voting, don't you think?
Yeah, voting, of course, in Maryland, of course. So Maryland is on the brink of making history. In the state of Maryland, we have never had any African American elected statewide. It just never has happened. Maryland boasts it's got more postgraduate degrees with African Americans with postgraduate degrees than any state in the union. The state of Maryland does. Um, when you think of that, Maryland is a relatively small state when compared to New York or California, but we have more people with post PhDs or graduate degrees than any other state. However, we also at the same time have more African Americans incarcerated per capita than any state in the union.
That's a sad statistic.
The sad statistic, and it tells us what time it is. On the one hand, we're seeing African American people get these graduate degrees, where we have one of the most affluent enclaves in Prince George's County than anywhere in the country. Yet the problems that African Americans are faced with, Claudia, remains to be systemic. So the reason the elections were so important, because for the first time, we now have the very likelihood of having an attorney general who will be an African American, and very likely a governor who will be African American. That has never happened before, and it could only happen now because of the right to vote. So this voting is very, very important.
What brought all this on? I mean, the energy, the changes.
Well, we're living interesting times. All over the nation, voting rights are being challenged. Laws are being passed to suppress the vote of African Americans. And too often, people don't know the history, even here in Maryland. For example, in 1909, there was what was called the Grandfather's Clause. Grandfather Clause was passed by the Maryland General Assembly. And what the Grandfather Clause said was if your grandfather couldn't vote, you can't vote. That law disenfranchised tens of thousands of Black people, lost the right to vote. Most people have no idea that the Maryland General Assembly once disenfranchised African Americans. They don't know that history. Mm-hmm. It took the Supreme Court 6 years later, 1915, to restore the rights of African Americans to vote. And so I love this program, keeping people informed, because people have to know, A, their history, and B, be able to tell their own narrative.
Yes.
And one of the things, Claudia, as a lawyer, you will certainly appreciate this. When Roe versus Wade was struck down, it was passed, as you know, in 1971. When it was struck down by the Supreme Court, political pundits and legal scholars said it was the first time that women have been denied the right to an abortion or to choice. And that's simply not true. it's the first time white women were denied that right. In 1836, when the same Supreme Court, that same institution, passed the Dred Scott decision, which said that black people had no rights that white people were bound to respect, black women were routinely raped by their slave masters, and they had no legal recourse. They had lost control of their body due to the Supreme Court. It's that particular Dred Scott decision placed in law the right of white men to be able to rape black women without there being any legal consequence. And most people don't know that. And so when they say that Roe versus Wade was the first time women lost the right to vote, it's just simply not true.
Mhm.
You have to have the knowledge of that history.
Right. You do. You do. So in this particular election, there seems to be on the Republican end a nominee in the governor's race that was endorsed by former President Donald Trump.
Yeah, this particular election and this particular nominee, it's so clear. It is going to be so clear. Uh, Assuming, as I do, that the nominee is going to be an African American on this end, Marylanders, and in particular white Marylanders, will have to make a judgment. Do you take a Harvard trained, well educated, well recognized African American who has served this nation well, or do you take a guy named Cox, who's a former delegate, was so extreme on so many ways? He does not believe in chores. He literally wanted to impeach the current president, current
Governor.
excuse me,
Yes,
current
Governor
governor.
Hogan.
He worked actively to impeach him. And Governor Hogan today, in a press interview, said that he believed that Cox will cost the Republican Party the governorship. And I agree with Governor Hogan. He's such an extremist.
So this is a different outcome for Maryland, do you think, in some ways?
Well, yes, it is for Maryland. Remember, there were two big losers on Tuesday. And those losers were Governor Larry Hogan and Governor Larry Hogan. Governor Hogan selected his successor. He handpicked the successor that he wanted to succeed him. And the argument was in Maryland is the Hogan Republicans or the Trump Republicans. And this election clearly showed the Trump Republicans, the element, the ilk that runs the Trump wing of the party prevailed, and they prevailed greatly. So it was a major defeat for Hogan. And as you also know, Hogan um, interjected himself in the state's attorney's race and selected a candidate to support, and that candidate came in third place, showing you that Hogan's influence is not what it is. He really is a lame duck governor at this point.
Do you think the January 6th insurrection impacted in any way how voters thought and how they voted?
No, no. I think in time it will. I'm looking forward to tonight's hearing, which I think will reveal more about what the role of Trump was. But no, I think several things impacted on this election. One, it was held in July. Marylanders are not used to voting in July, so it affected the turnout. Um, People who traditionally would mail in, the mail in was not as great as it would have been had it been held in the fall. Um, but I think the factors that determined this election was turnout. You had all these candidates running for governor. Most people had not heard of them. And so those candidates that were better financed and better able to turn out, get out the vote effort prevailed. There are not any upsets at all.
Well, the question also is going to the polls. At least I voted during early voting,
I did.
and Maryland is one of those unique states where they give you plenty of options. You had a whole week of early voting from sunup almost to sundown, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. or something like that for 7 straight days, and that's before the actual primary day. Then you have the whole primary day. Then you have mail-in ballots options this particular year.
And
So,
and you can also register to vote on the same day
and you can register to vote on the same day.
and vote.
How good does it get?
I think, though, that one of the things that we have to do, you have to be able to tell voters why it's important to vote, why these elections make a difference, and be able to, once people have voted, deliver, right? Because it's one thing to get elected to public office, it's another thing to deliver. And one of the criticisms that I think is a legitimate criticism of many current public elected officials is that instead of being public servants, they want to be many celebrities. They want to have an entourage. They want to be treated like they're rock stars. And I think that's a turnoff for a lot of voters.
Mhm.
Voters want people who will serve them, put their interests first, and make a difference in their lives. And historically, we can point to elected officials who happen to be African Americans. Once they got elected into public office, they made a difference. Washington, D.C., Marion Barry was a great mayor. I mean, he made a difference in the lives of Washingtonians. I lived in Washington during the Barry years, and I can attest that he made a difference. I lived in Chicago for a while. I was there when Harold Washington became the mayor of Chicago. He made a difference. And so getting people elected to public office who will make a difference is what we need, and it will inspire people to come out. When Maynard Jackson was mayor of Atlanta, the reason why we have the busiest airport in the nation in Atlanta, Georgia, is to be given the credit is be given to Maynard Jackson. He was able to make sure that African American businesses profited from the expanding of that particular airport.
So, if a voter came to you and said, "All I see is just a sea of signs, and I haven't done any research. I don't know who to vote for." I think there are a lot of citizens out there in that position. What would you say?
I think you're right, and I would say you've come to the right person. My granddaughter is a first time voter. She turned 18. She got her diploma in one hand and her voter registration card in another. And so she got the ballot because we did the mail in. And she said, Granddaddy, I don't know any of these people. I don't know what to do. I said, I can help you with that. And the same way I would offer to help her, I would offer through the caucus to help any citizen who don't know who to vote for or don't have the information. And by the way, it's not difficult to understand why people would have difficulty. When you look at the ballot, even those who are veteran voters, you had the governor, you had the attorney general, you had the controllers of Congress to vote for, you had races that included the orphan judge, circuit sheriff, register of wills, people who simply said, well, what do these people do? You know? And so it's important that they have some help, and we could do that. We monitor the records of these elected officials. We know which elected officials have been very supportive of our efforts, and we know which ones have not. And so we're in a position to be able to advise people, and as your program pointed out, and inform them so that the decision that they make is an informed vote. It's not based on the fact that I keep seeing this name in the newspaper or this picture of this person on television. It's here's what these people have done either for us or to us, which is why we either should vote for them or vote them out of office. And we can
Well,
do that.
it's important that you said what these people have done, because somebody could write on their campaign literature, Navy veteran, and somebody, oh well, he's part of the Navy.
Yeah.
Got my respect.
Yeah.
Okay, check
Well,
the box.
yeah, those days are kind of over with. That's why it's important that we have these kind of discussions. Every vote that you cast should be for something, right? So if you're casting a vote for mayor, you should have some idea what you want your mayor to do, right? Or if you're casting for county executive or governor. The bottom line is whoever you vote into public office should improve the quality of your life or the lives of your children. And I give the example of Baltimore City, just as an example. For people who know what Green Mountain Avenue is, in Baltimore City. If you go down Greenman Avenue or you go to Baltimore, you have a huge number of vacant houses, right?
Right.
So if a candidate comes and says to you, if I'm elected to public office, I'm going to address vacant housing. I'm going to see to it that's more affordable housing. That will resonate with voters. So they vote for that person. If 4 years later, they've done nothing about the vacant housing, they've not built more affordable housing, it shouldn't be hard to figure out how you need to vote, because promises made must be promises kept, and we must keep everybody accountable. If they're in public office, we've got to hold them accountable, regardless of what position they have, what their gender is, what their ideology is, or what their race is. They've got to be held accountable.
Well, in your work as the convener of the Caucus of African American Leaders in Anne Arundel County, I have noticed that your work does not stop after after the election is over. You tend to work with the person you've chosen, in that elected position, and so the work goes further.
Right. In fact, that's you know the, it's so important that people understand that casting one's vote is only one part of holding people accountable. There are commissions, there are boards, there are decisions that will be made that affects your quality of your life. So you've got to be involved. You've got to hold your elected official accountable. And more importantly, you've got to have a seat at the table. It was Shirley Chisholm, the late Shirley Chisholm, the late great Shirley Chisholm, who said you either have to have a place at the table or you bring your own chair and demand a seat at the table. And that's what we have to do.
Well, I can attest to the fact that you have a seat at the table. I mean, literally,
Yeah.
you are in the mayor's office with a group of workers who are articulating policy.
And we've seen some, if we come to Annapolis, I mean, I could point to a lot of progress that we've made in the city of Annapolis. Annapolis was one of the first municipalities before the Maryland state government passed required body cameras. We had body cameras in 2014. And those body cameras came because of the agitation and the litigation that we were involved in, demanding that there be body cameras. And so we had body cameras. We've had a huge change in the police department. As a result of bringing a new chief in who happened to be an African American, we've seen an increase of women, African Americans, and Latinos on the Annapolis Police Department. The department is more reflective of the community that it serves. And the progress doesn't stop there. We've been able to see a number of things accomplished just from applying the pressure, keeping people informed, and making a difference. It's just open. This is a public housing. It used to be called Newtown 20. It was absolutely terrible shape. That place, and now we have.
So, this requires, though, meetings with county executives, mayors, and their staff to really articulate your concerns, and having a seat at the table when the police chief is being chosen. It requires efforts like that to really follow up after the election to be sure the campaign promises are in fact met. But there's so much work. I believe it sounds like there's still work to be done.
No question, no question. And many of the problems that are confronted, let's use Baltimore City. Baltimore City is an excellent example. As I told you, I lived in Baltimore, I worked in Baltimore. The problems of Baltimore City are not intractable. They're not unsolvable. Baltimore City, in my opinion, needs leadership that cares, that absolutely cares. It makes a huge difference. And some of the kinds of things that the leadership of Baltimore City should do and could do is what some would think is relatively simple, but it means so much. First, litter, just cleaning up the city, physically cleaning up the city, giving people some sense that, we want to change the way certain neighborhoods look. And we're going to put the resources in it to make a difference. Um, in Baltimore City, as you know, violence and gun violence have become so routine that people hardly pause unless the victim is white or Jewish. Then it becomes a huge issue, you know. But when you look at the number of young people who happen to be African American who are dying in Baltimore City, and the reaction to that is like business as usual. But whenever someone else of another complexion dies, it's a whole different approach that's taken. And so we've got to make sure that all human life is held with the same sense of value. If it's wrong to kill someone who's a entrepreneur, then it should be wrong to kill someone who lives in a neighborhood who's just trying to make it.
You have authored a book, and I'd like you to share more about that book that you've authored.
Thanks, delighted for that. As you know, my mother lived to be 104 years old.
She
Um,
did.
and my mother was in many ways a saint. But one of the things that my mother told me was the importance of the narrative, telling the story. And if you let other people tell your story, you don't get the same impact. So when I wrote this book, it's called Some People Watch Clocks, I Watch People. And you can learn a lot by just watching people. And so I was able to, as you know, I was hired by the Chicago Tribune, which owns the Capital newspaper. So I did a series of columns over the years on different political uh, and social events that occurred and recorded those particular events. So this book is a review of some of the history that we've lived through. And one of the things prior to um, President Trump being voted out of public office, I wrote about 8 months beforehand a column that said he was going to lose the presidential election, um, and that prediction came true. And there have been other things that have happened locally that I thought was important to comment on, and so the book highlights some of the history that have occurred. Uh, you and I both know about the great struggle that it took to get an African American woman appointed to the circuit court. For more than 300 years, that hadn't happened. And they didn't make any difference, as you know, who the governor was.
It didn't.
It could be a Republican, it could be a Democrat, it could be a conservative, it could be a liberal. None of them appointed a woman of color in Anne Arundel County to the circuit court, period. And so we were able to raise that issue. You will remember very well the late Speaker, Michael Bush, when you ran, originally was supporting the other candidates who were setting judges who were all Republicans. And it took some of us going to Speaker Bush and saying, wait a minute, you're a Democrat. How is it that you're supporting these setting all white judges? And of course, he publicly switched and announced his support for you. But those are the kind of things you have to do to hold people accountable.
Now, your book is available on Amazon?
Yes, Amazon and local stores, as well as the libraries. If people in Anne Arundel County, they have stocked all the libraries with the books. And so people can definitely get the book there.
Now, two more things before we close out today, and that is one, there was a recent racist graffiti incident in Anne Arundel County. I mean, what do you suppose is why is this just this engineering up where all of these churches in particular are being attacked? And then you can tell us also about the Emmett Till app.
We'll do so. Again, thank you. Claudia, whenever you read American history, whenever there have been progress, there have been a reaction to that. Most people remember Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous I Have a Dream speech in 1963, August 28th. But they've forgotten that following Martin Luther King's 1963 speech, I Have a Dream, a nightmare occurred on September 15th, 1963, 6 weeks after Martin Luther King Jr. spoke, white bigots blew up a church and killed 4 Black children in response to that. Whenever there have been progress in this country, there's been a reaction. Reconstruction was a reaction. Black people had gotten elected to public office. There was a Black man who was governor of Mississippi, of all places. Blacks were making progress, and suddenly got this reaction, and then we got the second Reconstruction. I maintain that when President Barack Obama got elected, it unleashed the racism. It had always been there. There was this backlash to it, and out of that backlash came Donald Trump. And of course, he gave permission to white supremacists and others to say what they want to do. So here's what we've come up with. It's important for the community and Black leadership in particular to know when incidents like the one you described at the church takes place. So we're creating the Emmett Till Alert app. And what's going to happen is on August 28th, on the anniversary of the March on Washington, this alert's going to be available to judges who happen to be African American. It's going to be police officers who are African Americans. It's going to be civil rights leaders, clergy, politicians, etc. And the idea is that from this point forward, whatever an incident that occurs where someone is threatened to harm Black people, we're going to let our people know that it's going on. There have been incidents all over Maryland that have occurred that Marylanders who happen to be African Americans, unless you live in that immediate community, do not know. The most atrocious one took place in June. Last 4 days of school in Wacomico County, Maryland, a white student threatened to go into the school and kill all the Blacks. People living on the Western Shore didn't know about it. And so this alert would allow people all over the state, when incidents like that occur, to be put on alert that is taking place. So if you happen to be driving and you learn that there's a racial incident going on in some parts of Maryland, it'll give you the information you need to be informed and your family be informed that this particular area may not be safe for you to go into.
So the app, once it comes out, will it be available on Apple's App Store and Google Play Store, or how will that happen?
It's going to be free. The app's going to be free. You will be able to download. We will actually send to people who will ask for the app, as well as public officials who will get the app, because we're going to forward it to them. And there's just something we'll be able to download it. And again, the app works very similar to the Amber Alert. When a child's been kidnapped, you're immediately notified that that particular child's been kidnapped, and certain basic information is given, what kind of car that person was driving, etc. Well, this app will work simple. We'll be able to tell people what kind of incident occurred. It's always going to be a racial incident if it's coming from the Emmett Till Alert, but what kind of incident it is, whether it's somebody's home that's been firebombed, or whether someone has been, through mass shootings, killed, or whether graffiti is placed on some church, or whether property has been destroyed or desecrated with racist bigotry images. So that's what it's designed to do, to inform the community.
That's wonderful. And how can, again, our listeners get a hold of your book, Something to Watch For?
Oh, great. I'll be on Amazon. Please feel free to do Amazon, or call me directly.
So we can go to Amazon.com. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. God bless.
God bless you. Thank you so much for being a part of our program today. We're back on Being Well Informed, and we are actually moving into the direction of actually a new and exciting topic. And I'm happy at this time to welcome Connell Lee. Hello,
Hey,
hello, hello.
thank you so much for inviting me today.
Yes, I am thrilled that you're here, and I also am excited that you are here to share with us specifically about the topic of long term care insurance. And I see this as an extremely important topic because you are kind of a specialist in this field, wouldn't you say? You are Connell Lee, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Connell Lee, and I've been in the financial services industry for the past 17 years, working with the Ameriprise Financial. So my job is really to help people to make good financial decisions in regards to how to use their resources. So saving for retirement, educating their kids, but also making sure that the family is protected. And part of protecting the family is making sure that you have the proper types of insurance um, coverage for your family, which includes looking at long-term care insurance.
Now, we had a conversation earlier today
Mhm,
because
mhm.
you are wonderful at doing financial investment work for me. And one of the things that you clarified, which perhaps you can again better inform our audience about, there is a difference between long term care insurance and long term disability insurance. Can you enlighten us more?
Yeah, so one of the things I always ask as we're going through sort of a financial assessment and making sure that people have the proper insurances in place is what insurances do you have? Uh, Typically, when I ask about long-term care insurance, there's a lot of folks that get it confused with disability insurance. And disability insurance, what that is income protection. So what that means is if you go to work, a lot of folks have W-2 income. You get a paycheck. If something were to happen to you, you get sick, injured, that would put you out of work for a period of time. The disability insurance is what actually pays your salary, pays your income. So the disability insurance, usually for short-term disability, a lot of times you can get majority of your income covered. If it lasts more than 90 days, which is typical with a lot of employers, then the long-term disability will cover at least 60 to about 66% of your income. Your family is still trying to get back on your feet. So,
That's just so important because have income protectorily, specifically the issue when it to insurance that has to do with protection if you're
that insurance, the income protection, the disability insurance, that is really important for while you're in your working years. So once you get into the workforce, I always like to tell people, your biggest asset is your ability to work. If you think about, if you earn, let's say, you know, $50,000, over a course of 10 years, that's,
hmm
if you do it over a course of 20 years, that's $1 million,
hmm
right? So over a course of 30 years, that's $1.5 million. So what you're essentially doing with the disability insurance is you're protecting that income. So if something happens, then you still have income coming into the family. So the difference where that comes in is, and as we'll talk about as we get into it, is the long-term care is really for is really move out of the workforce into your retirement years. That's where the long-term care really comes into play.
So there's often been this concern when people begin to age and they get to the point where, let's say, in terms of your ability, let's say you had a stroke and you are incapacitated for 30 to 60 days or more. How does long-term care insurance work?
Yeah, so long-term care, what it looks at is what they call it is the daily essential daily living functions. So what that includes is looking at things like eating, bathing, transferring, continence. That's where you look at things like Alzheimer's or dementia, things like that that affect people, and transferring, all of those different types of things. Things that you normally attribute to just the aging process. I'm sure we all have elderly people in our family, and as they get older, they slow down a little bit, right? They slow down a little
Mhm,
bit, and they may need a little bit of help, doing just sort of the basic things. So the question is as you get older, how are you going to get that help that you need? How are you going to accomplish getting the help that you need in order to make sure that when you age, that you can age with dignity, and make sure that first of all who is taking care of you as you
mhm,
age,
mhm.
um, and how's that going to happen?
Well, if I had an aunt who aged, and then there was this concern about Medicaid spend down. I mean, how does that impact people who are in a long-term care facility?
Yeah, so the federal program for long-term care is through Medicaid. Okay, so sometimes people get the two confused with Medicare is really health insurance.
Hmm.
That's where the retirement health insurance sort of come in. Medicaid is designed, like I said before, for the elderly or the retired folks to age with dignity. It was originally designed for people that did not have means to make sure that there was resources set aside to take care of them. And so, sort of understanding how that program sort of came about, um, uh, it's a huge piece of the budget. If you look at the federal budget, look at Medicaid. It's a large expense just in general to be able to take care of folks. Um, but to qualify for it, you have to basically spend down most of your assets to a very low level. You can keep very little. Usually, no more than $2,000 to $3,000 of your financial wealth you can keep. They want you to spend your money first. In addition to that, they will also want you to subsidize those costs with Social Security, or if you have any pension income as well. They want your money first before they start footing the bill for those
For the
long-term
long-term
care.
care facility
Exactly,
expenses.
exactly, exactly,
So,
exactly.
if I purchase long-term care insurance, how would that essentially change the Medicaid situation or the spend down situation?
Yeah, so let's just talk about just a little bit about the overall cost, right? So if you look nationally, like what the cost of care is, um, for someone to stay in their home, it costs somewhere around about 5 grand a month, right? That's for having a nurse or home health aide to come into your house. It's somewhere around about 5 grand a month. If you're looking at full coverage or full nursing home care, now you're in the 6 digit range. So now you're looking at like $100,000 a year for nursing home facility. So
Because that's skilled facilities.
a
You
skilled
you know,
facility,
you have
exactly.
access to nurses around the clock.
It's 24 hours, exactly.
It's 24-hour nursing care.
24-hour nursing care, exactly. Exactly, and they're administering. medicine, all of those
Right.
different types of things.
But wait
Uh,
a minute. So long-term care insurance, though, now gives people the option, does it not? Where if they don't want to move out of their house and I want to stay home and have home health care, how does the long-term care insurance come into the picture?
well, so the where that comes into the picture is if you have insurance, you can now choose how you want to have care administered.
Mm,
Now, the state, and depends on your state, but there is some limited home care through the state because the even though Medicaid is a federal program, it's administered through the state. So
correct.
there is some home health care through Medicaid now, as before there's none, but it's very limited. Most of the care that you see from coming from Medicaid is that you have to go to a facility, right? So
Okay.
so if you don't want to go to a facility, then you have to pay for it. You have to pay for it, and that's where the insurance comes in.
So this really is giving people an option if they're saying, absolutely not, I do not want to go to a long-term care facility.
Correct, correct, correct. And that's one of sort of the misnomers that when I talk to people about long-term care, they think um, that kind of throws them back when you start talking about long-term care. Because most people, when you think of long-term care, you think of the same thing you just said. Is like, I do not want to go to a
A
nursing home
nursing home.
because we've all sort of experienced.
I don't want to
Um,
sell my house. That's what they're thinking.
don't want to sell the house, or you don't want to be you basically don't want to be in a hospital, right? You don't
I
want
don't
to be
want to be in a hospital forever.
correct. You don't want to be in a hospital. Exactly. Exactly.
So this long-term care insurance now has options.
Yeah. So going back to one of your questions is, how does it relate to the Medicaid system, right?
Mhm.
There's what's called a partnership program, and what the partnership program is basically an incentive by the federal government for people to purchase insurance because, like we said before, it's very expensive and they want your money first, right?
Right.
So what they will allow you to do if you purchase insurance, they will say, hey, if you say you purchase say $100,000 of insurance benefits, right? And we could talk about what sort of goes into that, but just in general, you buy $100,000 of insurance benefits. Uh, if you use that policy and say you use it all up, right? You use that policy, you need it and you're staying at home and you use it all up and you still need care, Medicaid will say, hey, this person bought insurance, so we're not going to force you to spend down that $100,000 of your money. You can keep that, and that allows you to keep more wealth in your family, so you have more resources to pass along to your family, as opposed to working hard all your life only to have long-term care expenses to sort of drain down the wealth that you have accumulated over your entire life and sort of erode what you built and worked so hard for.
So, I'm thinking that there are a lot of people out there who love their home. They really, really love their home. And they can't, you know, get themselves to believe that they have to give their home up because their health is so bad.
Yeah. So um, the good thing about at least the Medicaid system is that they won't force you to sell your home, right? So if you're by yourself or you have a significant spouse, they won't force you to sell the home, but um, they won't necessarily administer care there, right? Depending on your state. So that's the thing to sort of remember is that if you do want to stay in your home, then the insurance can help with that. Another thing that can also help with is that if you have close family members that can administer health, it can also be used to compensate them for taking care of you as well. That's another benefit.
Hmm. Hmm. So, there are also, I'm seeing here, quite a bit of other specialties that you cover. So, it's not just the long term care insurance. I see that you cover retirement planning strategies. What is that about?
Yeah, so retirement, I mean, that's one of the major goals that most people have. So retirement plan strategies is looking at what type of retirement plan vehicles and funding does the individual want to utilize to help them to be able to, one, save for retirement, and then two, manage the taxes in through retirement. So you
Is
got.
there a rumor going on that 401ks are not popular?
Well, I would still say that that's going to be primarily the dominant way that most people save for retirement. But it is a movement that there are more and more people that want to retire earlier nowadays. So if you have a goal where you want to retire, prior to age 59 and a half, then there are some other strategies and some other techniques that you may want to utilize outside of a 401k that can allow you to access dollars without getting penalized.
You also have under your specialties education planning investments. What is that about?
Yeah, so work with a lot of families and young children that one that's a major goal that I see a lot of times is making sure that we can pay for college and college expenses. So there's a number of strategies that can be used to help individuals make sure that there's enough funding for education. So there's a number of different strategies that you can use. The biggest one that most people look at is the 529 plan. It's sort of like it's the 401k to retirement planning. The 529 is the 401k of education planning. But there are also other investment vehicles that may be profitable in that area as well. So depending on your situation, you may want to do a 529 plan along with some other strategies to nail down your education planning.
Retirement income strategies. What do you do there?
So retirement income strategies. So once you get to the point where you're saying, "Hey, I've accumulated enough resources to retire," right? I made it to the mountaintop, right? You have to have what we gotta have a strategy to figure out how you're going to create a retirement paycheck. So, how do you
Mhm.
take the wealth that you accumulate and make a retirement paycheck? So, uh, that what we do there is make sure that people are able to take whatever type of assets they have for retirement to create income for it, so that way they can have the retirement paycheck and live off of.
Then there is cash flow management strategies.
Yeah, so cash flow management strategies. So what that is really maximizing uh, the bottom line in your budget. So whether that be looking at the debt management, how you receive refunds, if you get refunds through in your tax return, um, resource allocation. Most folks, you have competing goals. You have retirement. You got to protect your family. You may have education planning for kids. Is looking at how can we sort of maximize your cash flow to get every dollar's worth, that we're not wasting dollars.
Now, going back to retirement plan distribution, oftentimes people have 401As, 457Bs, and 401Ks in the private sector.
Sure.
Uh, but distribution is something people often look forward to as they age. And some people really don't know the actual age where they can begin, uh, you know, pulling from a retirement program without penalty.
Yeah, so normally, so you're looking at for normal retirement age, that's going to be 59 and a half. You can get money from an employer sponsored plan at age 55 without penalty. Um, but for most folks, that what you're really looking at is 59 and a half, and that's sort of true of most plans. If you look at here in the DMV, as we say, a lot of federal workers, the TSP, contractors, 401ks, things like that. 59 and a half is usually the sort of the magic age where you can get money out without penalty. With that said, that money is most folks mainly contribute on the pre-tax side,
Hmm.
which means when you put money in, you didn't get taxed on it. You took a deduction off of it. So if
Hmm.
you make $100,000 into one of those retirement plans, when you go to file your taxes, it looks like you only made 90, right? Because you put $10,000 into a 401k or a TSP
On the pre-tax side.
on the pre-tax side. So
Yeah.
when you pull the money out, all that money is taxable at your ordinary income level. So it's you're receiving income at that point. So you're going to pay ordinary income at that point when you start pulling the money out.
So what about the Roth IRA? Is the Roth IRA something that is helpful in retirement planning or not?
It is. So what we teach people and what we advise people to do is that you want to be diversified in the type of assets that you save money into to give yourself room to control how you're getting taxed on those distributions. So the Roth works opposite as the traditional IRA or the 401k. So you're not going to get a deduction now. So you're going to pay your taxes now, but the trade-off is you don't pay any taxes anymore. So it's tax free for the
Mm.
remainder of your life. So which is nice. So if you put money in, so say you put $10,000 into a Roth and it grows into $100,000, you only pay taxes on the 10, but now you have $100,000 uh,
Oh, I see.
in investment that's 100% tax free, right? So that's the power of the Roth is you pay your taxes now, is growing tax deferred, and when you pull the money out, is 100% tax free. And if you have both tax free and pre-tax money, then you have some flexibility of where you want to pull your money out to help control your taxes when you get into the distribution planning. But if you only have the pre-tax side, then you only have one option, and you know whatever that tax liability is what that tax liability is. You don't really have many choices. So it's just a way to help hopefully um, lower the overall taxes that you pay
Mhm.
overall, and give yourself some flexibility and options in the future.
We only have a few more minutes, so I thank you so much for coming. And I see also under specialties you mentioned employee stock options. How is that important for people who really working for companies and they have stock options?
Yeah, so stock options can be great if your employer has those, so they can be a great place to build wealth. But there are some tax ramifications with that need to be considered if you want to utilize those type of investments to um, the maximum benefit. So on a case by case basis, we can look at those situations and see, hey, let's look at what types of options you have. Look at how those things for tax and see how we want to best utilize it to reach your overall financial goals.
That is wonderful. You have really, really, really helped us out tremendously in better understanding long-term care insurance in particular, and you have really, really knocked it out the ballpark for us in better understanding what we need to know. So thank you so much for coming on board tonight. I appreciate your willingness to share with us so much information. And listeners, you have the website. Please be sure to click it and introduce yourself to Connell Lee. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Welcome, Terry Gibson, Senior Director of Legal Shield. Why should we join Legal Shield?
because it makes perfect sense. When I was introduced to this many years ago, I thought about the fact that you could have unlimited legal counsel. You can have 24/7 emergency access to an attorney. You can have your will done for a fraction of what it will cost you to go through a traditional attorney. That's why you should join Legal Shield.
Well, it says that, according to Investopedia, it is the best online legal services for 2022. Why do you suppose it received that rating?
Well, because it is, because Legal Shield has top rate attorneys. Legal Shield handles many different areas of law. Um, the company has been around for 50 years, so that's a lot of stability, and they have many success stories.
Well, I understand also that if I wanted to sign up, and I already have Legal Shield, and I can really attest to the fact that it is a great product if you want especially if you want quick answers to legal questions like, should I use my sick leave for COVID-19, isolation? And preparing a last will and testament. And we're talking about for the low cost of $29.95 per month. So let me repeat that, $29.95 per month. I mean, I don't know of any any law firm that could match that.
There is none.
So the 5 Ps, and when we have a checklist for estate planning, all of this is covered for your $29.95 a month.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. Legal Shield for that $29.95 will prepare for you a standard will, which is your last will and testament, a living will, a healthcare power of attorney, and a durable power of attorney. Those documents alone, normally, as I understand it, comes to around $2,000 a month, but here it's included along with the other service for the $29.95 per month.
Well, what about your spouse?
The plan covers your spouse and your children under the age of 26.
So that are living in the household in the same.
Yeah, exactly, living in the same household, and all the members of the family are entitled to the same benefits.
That's marvelous. That's absolutely marvelous. So if we click this link that is currently on our screen, we would immediately go to this page here, and it says protection for your family, your business, and your personal identity. Those are many options there.
Right. Because Legal Shield has coverage for your family. Legal Shield also has coverage for your business. We have identity theft plans, CDLP plans. I mean, many different plans to cover whatever your needs are in life. So that's why you have here choices.
That's wonderful, because you still can, choose a traditional law firm. But for the quick answers to questions, and what about contract review? I find it extremely useful, and I've been practicing for 34 years, that it's good to have some access to contracts, which you do get under this plan.
Exactly, absolutely, because all of us probably know of a horror story of someone who signed a contract and had some negative consequences because they signed something they didn't that they didn't understand.
Because
because the option to pay an attorney somewhere between $300 and $500 an hour, the average person would probably just sign it as is
and say, no, I can't afford that.
Exactly.
So when they say that they are leveling the playing field here, they really do mean it, because you are really getting a bargain rate for access to consultations.
Exactly, because prior to Legal Shield, legal access was available to the rich and famous, or the people who could afford it. So now at $29.95 per month for a family, the level field is definitely the playing field is definitely level, because everyone now has equal access under law.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So thank you so much, Terry, for this opportunity to share Legal Shield with our audience.
Thank you for having me.